there is no other human I've met like you who has had the breadth of experience and somehow had their fingers in the pies of so many different high-profile things. It's almost unbelievable. And you seem to have had access to very deep levels of information and knowledge throughout the whole thing.
In 1976, remember that Jimmy Carter was elected president on November 4th of 1976. And one of the first things he did as the newly elected president, he contacted the head of the Central Intelligence Agency and asked that person to come in and provide to him all the information that the CIA had about extraterrestrial intelligence and the UFO phenomenon. Because as you know, President Carter, when he was governor of Georgia, had seen a UFO. Yes. Not just one of these faraway lights in the sky, but a UFO which he was convinced what it was. So he called that person in. Well, that person was George H.W. Bush. He had been selected by Jerry Ford when Jerry Ford came in after Nixon resigned, and Jerry Ford selected George H.W. Bush to be the head of the Central Intelligence Agency. And so, but in that meeting with President-elect Carter in late November of 1976, George H.W. Bush said to him, "Oh, okay, you're the president-elect. Now, I want to have, before I agree to give you this information about the extraterrestrial and UFO information that we have, you have to agree to leave me on as the head of the Central Intelligence Agency for you. I want to become like John Edgar Hoover was for the FBI, stayed there, you know, one administration after another, and I will agree never to run for public office. I'll just stay here as the head of the Central Intelligence Agency." And Jimmy Carter said, "No, I have someone else in mind that I want to bring on as the head of the CIA, who happened to be Teddy Sorensen." And so George H.W. Bush refused to give him the information. And he said that, you know, in order for you to get this information, you're going to have to go to the House Science and Technology Committee, have them contact the Congressional Research Service, and have them request declassification for these documents, because the only people that are allowed to see them at the present time are those with a need to know.
Okay, now let's talk about how you ended up in the Vatican libraries. Let's talk about, I remember you showing the drawing that you sneaked your little, you know, yellow pad into your pants and came out with a sketch, a tracing of these symbols. But let's talk about how the Vatican became involved.
Well, what it was is that I contacted the Vatican and again asked them if I could get access to this, in their classified. And what happened is that that's what generated the Air Force authorizing me to go in to see the classified portions of Blue Book. This was actually in the files of the Blue Book. That's where I saw this. Is that they actually brought the files to Washington, D.C., and they brought them to the Jefferson Building, which was a brand new building for the Congressional, the Library of Congress. There wasn't anybody in those offices yet. And I went over there on a Saturday morning, had to show them 3 different forms of photo ID to get in. There were these 2 suits at the door, you know. And so I went in, and they said, "You have to walk down this hall." And so I walked down the hall, you know, echoing in this hall with nobody in the whole building, brand new building, and get in this elevator, and I go down to the basement, and I get out of the elevator, and I can see this light on down in this office down there. So I go down, and there's 2 other suits there who recheck my ID, and it just occurred to me when I was coming down in the elevator, I opened up my briefcase and took out a yellow pad and put it under my arm. And so when I went down to the basement floor and met with these guys, they took my briefcase and said, "Look, you can't take any notes or anything on anything you see in there." And so I walked in, and what there was this room about maybe 18, 20 feet wide, about 10 feet deep, and they had these big folding tables. You think it's going to be something really sophisticated, right? They had these folding tables, and they had these boxes, these little shoebox size things. They were this kind of light green, kind of institutional green boxes, and they were filled with microfiche. And I took the microfiche out and brought them to one of these very unsophisticated tin kind of microfiche crank machines, and I started looking through them all. And I said, "I'm never going to have time to read all these documents of what's in here," but I was looking for pictures. And so I found this set of pictures that showed an absolutely uncontestable UFO. that had landed, had hit in this field, and it had plowed this big furrow across the field and was stuck in the side of a bank, and it was all snow there. So this wasn't Roswell.
Right.
So here's this UFO sticking at like a 45-degree angle up out of this big snowbank, and they're U.S. Air Force people all around it. They had these big parkas on, and I recognized what they were, and they were taking film of it. So this dated it somewhat. It was a film camera with those two big rolls on the top of the camera, so like it's in the 50s or something. And so I'm looking through these pictures, these different pictures of it, and suddenly I realized that at the bottom of the dome of this UFO, I could see these symbols. So what I did is I took out the yellow pad and I opened it up to the back cardboard cover on the inside, and I put it under the microfiche, and I shrunk the microfiche to fit right onto the page, and then I traced the symbols exactly. This is what they were, and I folded it back up, and I put the microfiche back, and I said, I better get out of here because I've now got this. So I put the yellow pad under my arm, and I go back out, and I walk out. And these two suits that were out there were kind of surprised that I'd come out of there. And so I'm walking away, and I pick up my briefcase, and I walk away, and I get about 15, 20 steps away from them, and one of them says, hold it, what have you got there? And I said, oh, it's my briefcase. I just picked my briefcase back up. And he said, no, what's that under your arm? And he walked over to me, and he snatches the yellow pad away like this, and he ruffles all the way through all the pages of it, and there was nothing
there.
On it. So he hands it back to me.
Because it was on the cardboard.
And so I go back the following Monday morning to Jesuit headquarters, right there in Washington. And I go in to see Father William Davis, who was my immediate superior at the Jesuits. And I show him this, and I tell him what I found. And he reaches down, and he slides out the bottom drawer of his desk, and he takes out a little manila envelope, and he slides out of it an 8.5 by 11 black and white glossy photograph of a UFO. And he hands it to me, and he said, my sister sent this to me, Dodie sent this to me. Her husband, whom I had met, was an air traffic controller in the Seattle airport. And his best friend is a commercial pilot who took this photograph right out of the window of his plane, and he didn't dare report it to anybody because of all this ridicule effect. Right. So he brings it to his best friend, who is the air traffic controller, saying, there, now I've done what I'm supposed to do. He brings it home and didn't know what to do with it, gives it to his sister Dodie and says, give this to your brother. He's a priest.
Okay.
And so he had it in his drawer. You say, what does that mean? What does that mean that people think like that? Why is this something that they should tell a priest about? And there I was at Jesuit headquarters in the process of becoming a priest, a Jesuit priest, and here I'm getting all this information, and yet the Vatican won't show it to us, won't tell us. Even a Jesuit who's the head of the Vatican Life won't show this to us. So I went to the National Council of Churches in WISC and asked them to set up a task force, and they wouldn't do it. So that's how I got into this. So that I ended up getting contacted by Stephen Greer, and he wants me to be general counsel for the Disclosure Project, and that my job was to vet all the different potential candidates we had.
This was late 90s now?
This was 2001.
Oh, it was in 2001.
Yeah, this was like beginning of 2001. Yeah. And he asked me if I would, because I had gone by this time from 1994 with Dr. John Mack and all that. I was invited to go to the International UFO Congress and brief them about how this thing was going with Dr. John Mack, because everybody was up in arms over this thing, right? Yeah. And so I came in originally in 1995, I think, and briefed everybody at the International UFO Congress about what John Mack was doing and stuff, and in my getting to interview more and more people about this. And so they asked me, they say, look, it's a little unique to have a Harvard Law School graduate who's legal counsel for the Jesuits to be here talking to the UFO community. Will you tell us what you think about all of this? And so I began to be invited back fairly regularly, and I was explaining to them, and it was enabling me to think much more deeply about all of this, to take the time to think about all of this. I had already done the JPL lecture to the SETI people, so I at first explained to them the theological implications of all this and the philosophical implications, and then I started talking to them about the different worldviews that people have. that people actually experience the UFO phenomenon from the perspective of their worldview. And that's what they think about the UFO phenomenon. So if you're, a military person, you think about it as a military threat. If you're a kind of a new age person, you think of, oh, these are going to come and save us. They're going to solve all of our problems. And so that different people have different experiences of the phenomenon.
So here you have it, disclosure, which was Stephen Greer's attempt. Just bring the experts in, let them tell what they saw. You're there, you've vetted them.
In a dead silence on the part of the media.
Dead silence.
And
I mean, I was there.
No congressman wanted to talk about it.
No one wanted to talk. No. And these guys, I mean, some of these older men in particular who had been holding on, through their national security oaths, were in tears. I mean, it was very challenging for them to tell a story.
I had agreed to represent any of them.
Yes.
If they tried to revoke their pensions, or tried to prosecute them for a violation of their security clearance, I had agreed to represent them individually. So that's how we got a number of them to come forward. And talk.
If you like this video and you want to see more amazing content, go ahead and check out the next video on our channel.